What's up, everyone? This is Big Poner. I'm here today to show you my favorite choice for bow builds. Um, this is also a good thing to have knowledge about. The reason why is because next season might wind up being a bow league. Um, and with the gem that they're talking about, making it so that you can basically turn bow skills into barrage type skills, this skill would be absolutely OP that way. The way I have it set up is extremely OP. Uh, I actually already recorded this, and then for some reason my mic quality was terrible, so I need to switch this back off. Um, but I'm gonna go ahead and jump into a map, and then can check out this map. Got a pretty crazy map. I had a crazier one, but um, 100 and it was like 160 something quant buffed up. This one will be 153. But we got extra monster life, elemental resist, less area of effect, cursed by enfeeble, a bunch of nasty mods. Just to show you that this build is good for clearing even really hard maps. I'll go ahead and show you all of my gear that I'm using in the video when we get to the end, and then I'll talk about some of your options. Ooh, owie. Little surprise attack right there. So as you can see, I mean, pretty much shoot. Everything gets cleared pretty easily. Chains. Ice shot, the really nice thing about ice shot, first of all, the damage when you just look at a damage sheet for it is very misleading, and the reason why is because when you shoot an enemy, there's two types of damage going on. You have an initial impact, and then you also have the cone damage, or basically an explosion. Um, so, for instance, like on this build, not counting the belt, I'm at like 5.7 million arrow damage, and then my cone damage is 5.9 million DPS. Then average hit for the arrow, I think like 1.1 million at like 97% effective crit. Um, but the thing about this is it instantly kills. It just wipes everything out. It wraps around stuff. And the damage is actually in groups. It just gets better because you have the cone damage, which can overlap. Which means if two things are standing next to each other, they're going to be taking damage from both of the hits. For our damage, so you'll notice that I have, I want to point this out, you notice that I have the Mirage Archer, and I have that set up with my Barrage. And the reason why is, first of all, it does a lot of damage, but the second reason is it provides knockback and freezing, knockback, freezing, chilling, all of those effects. And when I proc it, then it's just constantly essentially defending me. Whatever gets closest to me, it's just going to lock onto it, and then it's going to push it away from me. I mean, as you can see, he can't get near me because the barrage is just constantly pummeling him away from me. So it's kind of like a defensive and offensive skill that you can turn on. The other nice thing about Ice Shot is you use physical damage conversion, it gives you 100% conversion. So first of all, what does this mean? It means that we can do physical reflect, The only thing we can't do is elemental reflect. Um, oh, what are you doing? So that's kind of how I've got it set up. It is two six links. Choice of chest. In the featured stuff, the chest is probably the most expensive thing that you're not going to be able to get around that easily. The thing is you can start off with just one six link. So if you are trying to do this on a budget, that would be the option to do. If you're trying to go on a super budget, you can get yourself an Imperial bow and you can make something like this. Um, Basically, the reason why you do that is because six linking it is going to be a high cost. If you start with the Imperial bow, you have the nice elemental damage implicit, which is kind of nice. You get a higher level bow, which makes it so you can get higher tier enchantments, or you can go with a thicket bow. Six porcupine. With the porcupine, we can go with a porcupine. These are both really cheap at this point in the league. These are really good things to. Also, if you decide to do a bow next season and you want to go with an ice shot, these are good things to pick up early because most of the stats, like the only thing on here that's actually a shaper is the dual critical strike chance with critical strike chance if you have killed recently, which obviously that's nice, but it's not something that you have to have. You can still get a really nice physical DPS bow. Um, for instance, like this bow, there's actually, oh yeah, this one's a perfect example. So this one has no elder mods on it. It is an elder bow, but I rolled really good stats on it, so I'm not going to continue rolling it. You see I have the blind on it. The reason why I like the blind, the reason why I'm running a bow with blind is because the blind's really nice. It gives a 50% chance that they're not going to hit me. So it's kind of just more defensive. I have a lot higher DPS, more expensive bows that I could have been using. That's the one that I chose to use. And I've got like this bad boy, which is like 30, 30 exalts or something like that. I don't know. It's expensive. Um, I've got a bunch of actually really good bows. I have done a ton of crafting. This one's like 50 to 80 exalts. I played around with the Blood Rage on kill. The reason why I'm not actually currently using this bow is because I'm not actually really even using the Blood Rage because I'm actually using a Headhunter on this build. The Blood Rage was nice on hit. It's not really something you have to have. It was kind of just like a luxury. I would have gotten more damage if I just crafted flat attack speed, but I was kind of just using it being lazy. Um, there's a lot of stuff that you can accept on a bow, and that's one thing that makes getting a good bow for this build really easy is because you're converting all of your physical damage. You're also using cold damage, so a high cold damage roll is good. You can get cold damage from dexterity if you wind up doing a shaper bow. You can get a high physical damage bow. You can there's a lot of different directions that you can go. My suggestion, if you're trying to like min-max your bow as far as the damage that you're getting from it, use Path of Building. If you just want something cheap that you're definitely going to be able to use, you can buy a. I'm forgetting the name. You can buy a Death's Opus. It's probably one of the most popular bows just because it has such high critical strike multiplier. It adds the 2 additional arrows, which for this build you do want the extra arrows. There's 2 reasons why you want extra arrows. It increases your damage through 2 mechanics. Obviously more arrows coming out for your frost shot. We are boosting this up with the dying sun, so I have 5. I'm getting an extra arrow here, and then I'm also picking up an extra arrow in my ascendancy. Yeah, additional projectile and endless munitions. But the reason why you want to add projectiles is we're using 2 skills that benefit from it. We're using the ice shot, and then we're also using the barrage. So my barrage has 7 arrows. Obviously, the +2, one from a base of 5, +2 that are always there, one from my ascendancy, one from my quiver, and then I gain another 2 from the dying sun. I've essentially added 80% damage to each volley of barrage. So like uh, barrage is another one of those things that can be very deceiving in the DPS it's reflected. Um, because so like to give you an example, um, if you use path of building, you need to select all arrows if you want a realistic display of your DPS. Also, a lot of the DPS in this is not going to be seen. Obviously, Mirage Archer lowers the damage, but cold damage penetration isn't going to show up. Your hypothermia is not going to show up. I don't have hypothermia in here. Um, you could swap the slower projectiles for the hypothermia. I think I just didn't want to level up another one because I think I bricked my hypothermia. But the point is, I mean, I don't even have all of my jewels qualityed. I've got some bad rolls on some of them, and you can see the build is still really strong. Um, uh, I've got an assassin mark ring. It's not that great of rolls. I've got an amulet. It's not that great of rolls. Basically, my amulet, my boots, and my gloves are kind of where I'm getting all my resistances. You If you're using a headhunter, you are going to want your resistances on between your boots, gloves, amulet, quiver. So somewhere in those 4 places, you're going to have to get your resistances. If you're not using a headhunter, you're going to want your resistances probably on your boot, belt, and gloves. Um, I'm using the fractal thoughts. Don't focus on getting the ice shot damage enchantment. It's going to cost you a lot extra, and the ice shot enchantment does not add a lot of damage. It's really only a luxury that if you've got a bunch extra currency and you want to spend on it, get it, but it's literally a really, really small increase to your damage because remember, it's increased damage, not more damage. It is an increase though, so if you want to min-max your character, that is an option to go. The thing is with this build, you can craft pretty much everything for this build. You don't actually need a Fractal Thoughts. You can do a crafted helm using pristine fossils and frigid fossils, and you can get the -9 to cold resistances to nearby enemies. The reason why I don't go with that route for this build is, first of all of your stats are going to line up for this, so this is going to give you a lot of damage boosts, and it gives you some life. Not a lot because your intelligence is that high, but it does give you some. Um, if you need more tankiness, go though with the crafted helm because obviously you're going to be doing the pristine fossil with the frigid fossil, which is going to get you the chance to have the dual stat HP percent HP, and then also you're going to want a natural high HP roll with a -9 cold resistance to nearby enemies. It's going to supply you with damage and a lot of defenses. So if you're having trouble surviving, go with that. There is a video on how to make that exact helm. I originally made it for the frost the frostblade. Um, which character did I make that for? Frostblade character, I think. But it's up there. For amulets, something that's important, you want to get one that you're going to be able to use for a while before you enchant it. The Vengeance Cascade is absolutely essential. The reason why is because the way that it works is when your arrows reach the end of the road, they return to you. So that means it's going to reapply arrow damage to anything that it hits, and it penetrates everything, which means anything that's in its path is going to hit it, and then it's going to cause the cone damage, so everything's going to be taking more AoEs. Another important thing that I want to touch on this because it seems like a lot of people don't understand the mechanics for projectiles with bows. You have a lot of people that just get, they see, oh, I can get more pierces targets, I can get more chain, I can add fork, and they wind up with all of these things. So there's an order to how these things work, and you don't want to be stacking all of them. And the reason why is because say I have 3 penetrations, 3 chains, a fork, I have all of these things, and I shoot into a group of enemies. Most likely, the only thing that's going to happen with that volley of arrows as they're going to just pass through the enemies. And why is that? Because the first thing that happens in the order of arrow projectiles is they first pierce. So those three pierces, unless that volley hits a fourth target, it is never going to chain, it is never going to fork. So that means I shoot into the group and my arrows just pass through them. Piercing is basically the least desirable thing for this build. You're going to want to go with chaining. The reason why is because chaining will wrap around. That's one thing that's really nice about this build. You have impact damage, initial arrow damage, then you have a explosion that's area of effect that can overlap. With the chain, it is guaranteed if there's enemies in the area to hit all of those chains and then cause the area of effects, which in most cases, because of some increased area of effect and the base size, each time it chains, it's most likely hitting that initial enemy and the next enemy, which means each enemy that's being hit by each volley is taking multiple hits. That's one of the reasons why it does so much damage. Yes, it's 5.7 million DPS, but if you're shooting packs of things, the actual effective damage of that is the arrow damage, the explosion damage, and then all of the resulting explosion damage that is within range for the overlapping damage. There's also small, like, kind of like, I mean, well, I guess it would just be like really smart ways to use it. So, like, if there's an enemy against this wall, I can volley my arrows into it and see how the size of those. If there's an enemy standing right here and I'm shooting these, they're going to take impact from all of those explosions because they're obviously all overlapping because they're large enough that the center of that, they would have to be spread out pretty far even there. So yeah, like that, you can see kind of the size of the explosions. So it's pretty easy to get stacking damage onto multiple enemies, especially when you have something like, 5 of
My
these.
mana is gone.
Um, Boots, like I said, resistances, gloves. This is another thing that you're going to want to craft. The things that you want on this is the subterranean mods. You have two subterranean mods. You have the added cold damage, which you need a frigid fossil for, and you have the dual mod HP mod, because you do want to pick up HP on this build, and you kind of have to fit it in where you can get it in. And on this build, the places that you can do that, you can do it on your quiver, you can do it on your boots, you can do it on your belt, you can do it on your gloves. If you're using a headhunter, that gives you some health, but we're not focusing around the headhunter for this video. I will say that of all of my builds this season, six builds this season, this is the only build that I actually use the headhunter on. And why is that? Honestly don't really like the headhunter on a lot of my builds. I don't feel like it really offers much. I feel like I lose more by putting the headhunter on than I gain. But with this build, it works really well. So if you are looking for a crazy build for a headhunter, this one is definitely it. But for this, the reason why you want to craft the gloves is because you can get this 25 to 35 added cold damage, which is huge. Um, just by simply rolling it, the tier 1 roll is like half of that, or maybe even less. I think it's actually less than half of what you can get from that. So this is definitely worth crafting, and obviously you're going to do that with 2-socket resonator, and frigid fossil and pristine fossil, just like you're going to do your helm. Except for on this one, you're looking for the cold damage and then big life rolls. The thing that you need to also pay attention to is you probably want to make your gloves and you probably want to make your helm first if you're crafting those two items. Or you need to keep in mind that you're probably going to wind up hitting cold resistance because the frigid fossil gives you a higher chance to hit cold resistance. So if you're going to be crafting, say, your other you're going to be getting your other resistances on your belt and your boots, you're probably going to want to make the helm and the gloves first, because then you're going to probably hit cold resistance on at least one of them if you do both, which you don't want to craft boots first or buy boots and a belt first that have cold resistance on them, and then you wind up in a situation where you're overcapped by 80 or 90 cold resistance. Obviously, that's kind of just a waste of stats, and then you're going to probably wind up having to go out and look for a new belt, new boots to actually get your stats right. As far as a quiver, there are some options for this. You can go with the Rigwald's quills. The the fork actually works pretty well with chain. Fork and chain work pretty well together. A Rigwald's quills, I am throwing that out there, and the reason why is because it does add some nice area of effect. And this season they're pretty cheap. I think they're like an Exalt, because some of the other quivers have been a lot more popular. But personally, I like having the extra arrow, and basically you can just take this Shaper 83, alt spam, and then multi-mod like I've done. I was really picky, so this one actually took quite a bit of currency to craft. I would suggest the Spike Point Quiver. The reason why is because we get the global critical strike chance. The whole point of the build is to try to get a really high effective critical strike chance so that all of our critical strike multiplier becomes effective damage that's added. Um, Mark of the Elder, for ice builds, you really can't beat this. This ring is literally perfect for this build. It gives us increased attack damage, which remember, we have attack damage because we're using a physical damage weapon. That damage is then getting converted into cold damage, and this ring also adds cold damage. It also adds physical damage, which that is then in turn converted to cold damage. Um, we get some of the conversion from hatred, we get some of it in our tree, and then the jewel itself does conversion. Where's my ice shot? So it itself converts 60%, so we wind up completely converted with 25%, so that puts it at 85, and then we pick up some in our tree right here, which puts us at 105% conversion. So essentially all of the physical damage is converted to um, cold damage, which that makes it also so that you don't have to do like a physical to cold damage conversion to get all of it on like your gloves, because that's something you can craft. That would be wasted because you're already going to have 100%. Um, Other than that, I think that's pretty much it. If you're trying to do this cheap, like I said, you can start off with one of these forms and then just look for cold damage, high physical damage, good attack speed. Um, I have higher damage bows, but because we add a lot of damage, I like the higher attack speed. The reason why I like the higher attack speed is because even if another bow with a slower attack speed does more damage or a little bit more damage, I like being able to have that faster attack speed to apply the chill, the freeze, the knockback, all of that stuff. If they're about the same damage, I'm gonna always favor the higher attack speed weapon. Um, Personal preference, you might like having the higher initial shot damage because there's advantages to both. If you want to just shoot one time and then keep running, um, and deliver more damage in a single shot, that's obviously another play style, but that's kind of really just a preference. You can get really high damages out of other bows um, that are not a thicket bow. The thicket bow is just my preference and the preference of a lot of players. Um, if you can get an elder or a shaper, there's a lot of good mods. Like I said, there's cold damage per dexterity on shaper bows. Um, However, that's a popular one because there's a lot of bow builds that are doing added cold damage, which honestly that mod isn't even really that good, based on the amount of cold damage that you can get from your dexterity. Even if you were to like focus on boosting dexterity with like a percentage increase off of your chest or something like that, you actually get less added cold damage than, for instance, like if I were to take and create a six link short bow and then just go to my essences and throw this on here, uh, I would get more cold damage from just doing that than that mod would actually give me. So yeah, if you can hit you know, a tier 1 natural cold damage and that mod, then you would get quite a bit. But it, I mean, honestly, that mod's not really that good. It is good. It's not as good as I think a lot of people think that it is. Especially not for this build because you can just go really high physical damage. Um, anyways, I hope you guys. Oh, I need to talk about the flasks real quick. Flasks, at Zeri's Promise is absolute must. The reason why is because it is going to boost up off of your physical damage as extra chaos damage and your elemental damage, so it's kind of like double dipping. We are going to be using Diamond Flask, that's an absolute must. Need Health Flask, removes bleeding. I spoke about this before. I always like removes bleed on my life flask because when you start taking damage, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to click your health flask. It's just natural. Dying Sun adds the extra projectiles, which is going to boost the damage of your barrage because, like we talked about with barrage, it starts with 5 arrows. With this, now it's got 9 arrows when that's up. So essentially, we added 80% extra damage per volley just by adding extra arrows. And then the last one, Quicksilver Flask, that removes freezing. You could do some crazy stuff like I've done for some of my other characters and have chill immune, freeze immune. If you feel like you don't need the movement speed, or if you wanted to use like a double movement speed flask or something like that, but those are kind of more expensive options. That would be a more expensive craft than probably even crafting your 6 link chest. Um, anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoy this build. Peace.